You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Perfect. Hey, I really appreciate the invite. So thank you for thinking of us.
Great. Let's start by talking about markets. Just yesterday, we had some news. The Reserve Bank mentioned that they're upping the interest rate by another 0.5%. And that puts us at 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same package, they have predicted that by June 2023, we'll be at 3.9%, which is pretty much double where we are today. So what do you think, based on where we've been coming from the past few months in this climate, what do you think we're in for in the next year? I mean, are Kiwis going to be able to buy tasty cheese again?
I mean, inflation is one of the big problems that we're all facing globally, and it seems that it's a response to the challenges the globe faced around COVID. And I don't want to second guess those responses. They were at the time they were probably exactly the right type of thing we did, but we did put a lot of cheap money out into the world, and that money went into assets, and then growth happened and inflation kind of spiraled out of that. And so they're desperately trying to control it. New Zealand's doing it. Australia's a little bit further behind, but they're starting to get into a tightening cycle. The big one to watch will be the US Fed, because if they come out equally as hawkish, so predicting higher rates for longer, then that will be a down signal for the crypto and more at-risk assets. So tech stocks are also taking a bit of a hammering at the same time. And the kind of dynamic that's going on is, in a low interest environment, riskier plays give you better returns. And so, tech stocks, crypto were doing pretty well in that regard. But with the rising interest rates, then more conservative instruments with less risk are still paying decent returns. So people are moving, into bank accounts, cash, into bonds, that sort of stuff. And to the detriment of the riskier stocks. So that's what's going on in the markets. And so, and then on top of that, we've got, still got COVID virus running around, and we've got, other things going on, like, the terrible events in Ukraine and Sri Lanka. It's nothing ever happens in a vacuum, but it's, there are some things that are putting at question, global growth and all that sort of stuff. And frankly, the world didn't have a lot of ammunition left. We're at kind of record low interest rates. And so the least worst options are being chosen, I guess.
Right. Well, there's nowhere to go except up.
Up. Yeah.
And I also read yesterday, when I was looking at the news about the interest rate, some people were praising the New Zealand move because it means that there is now more room to come back down, should they need to. And so I think opinion seems to be split in terms of how long this type of environment will last. Would you agree with that we might come back sooner?
Yeah, like there's a camp that's saying it's transitory, and then there's a camp that's saying no, there's something fundamentally going along underneath that's going to drive inflation for a lot longer, which says to me that they're probably both right. It'll be somewhere in the middle. If I just have my own vacuum hat on, the ideal scenario would be a short-term blip in rising rates, and then everything stabilises, and then we get back into kind of a growth kind of risk-based investing kind of play. But I was listening to Bloomberg yesterday, and they're calling that kind of a 25%er, and so it says to me that somewhere in the middle. So maybe a little bit longer than everyone was originally hoping. So maybe the end of next year type thing.
Right, and I mean, end of next year seems terribly far away.
Oh, it does. It's the one thing I've really noticed as global events. The time horizon seems to be shrinking and shrinking. Technology means things happen faster. The impacts are happening faster as well. So it's a pretty uncertain time in the markets, I guess. And we're getting close to some record bottoms and record moves down, and Nasdaq and all the other indices. So can they go further lower? Absolutely.
Right.
There's no guarantees. But in terms of technical analysis, people are saying we're kind of getting into the bounds where we might be getting close to the bottom in some of those markets.
In terms of the Nasdaq, it's a package of tech stocks.
Sure.
And sometimes they're considered to be growth stocks, and that means that they're higher risk than other stocks. So bringing it back around to EasyCrypto, I know you're not a public company that has listed shares, but given this environment, this climate, does that affect you as a tech company? Does that affect EasyCrypto in terms of your near-term outlook?
Well, we're not immune to the market, so we kind of think of ourselves as a bit of a supermarket for crypto, but we also sell them, and we'll let people sell stuff back to us, I guess. So that's kind of the difference to that analogy. So if the market slows down and people are a bit worried about the economy, they're saving money, more money's going on to things like petrol and all that sort of stuff, undoubtedly there'll be flow-on effects, and you're seeing it in things like Netflix, you're seeing it in things like Uber, and you'll see it in the wider industry. So, it's something that we're certainly looking at. We have been growing at an incredible clip. The onus is on the directors to make sure that we're in the right places and the right size and doing the right things at the right time. And so as a business, we're always looking at the market, and we've got, good statistics around buy-sell ratios and what's coming in and all that sort of stuff. So, we're just keeping an eye on that. And undoubtedly in crypto, since the highs of November, there's been a decrease in volume. You're seeing it globally. It's all publicly available. It's the fantastic thing about crypto. So we're just continuing to work on our growth aspirations in certain markets, and we're looking at what we can do in the New Zealand market as well in terms of offering a wider array of services and making things as attractive as we can as well.
Right. So I guess for the average retail consumer, someone like myself, that every couple of weeks might come to EasyCrypto and buy some Bitcoin or Ethereum. If everything's dried up and there's no money left after my rent and my fuel and my cheese, then where does that leave a service like yourself if no money's coming in?
So again, right, that's we're subject to the macro environment as well. The great news is that doesn't seem to be happening. Like, we are still seeing good volume coming through. I gave up a long time trying to predict markets, but they just are what they are.
Don't call yourself an economist.
No, exactly. Even, and I know you want to touch on it later, but even last was it 2 weeks ago when the whole TerraLuna thing was coming unraveled, people were diving in to buy that, and that, for me, that would have been something I would have been quite nervous about doing, but they just saw it as an opportunity. So there's always people who are seeing opportunity, and there's always people who are seeing threat, and there's this market balancing act going on. And so, we're still seeing reasonably healthy volumes. Not what we saw in November, but we are seeing continuing to grow. Still doing lots of sign-ups and stuff.
Right. This is one of the weird things about crypto, right? Is that sort of everything is kind of slowly on fire around us, and yet everyone is maybe doesn't have the same enthusiasm as, like you mentioned, in November. But you're not by any means completely at the whim of these forces. Like, people still want to...
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that it was born out of the last financial crisis. Bitcoin came about because Satoshi thought the world needed a different way of doing financial transactions, peer-to-peer transactions. So at its genesis, at its core, it's about being anti-cyclical. Ironically, we are quite correlated with certain tech stocks at the moment and indices, but that's a fairly new phenomenon in the last 6 months or something. So the interesting thing looking forward will there be a decorrelation again? Will it be seen as a fourth asset class? Will it be seen as a safe haven asset? All of those narratives that have been around in the crypto sector for a long time are still there. For me, the irony was in 2018, the big call for crypto was we need institutional money. We need institutional money to be the big guy. And now we have institutional money, and the way they did it was they treated us like a tech stock. And so we got the good and the bad, and it happens in everything. You cannot, without good, there cannot be evil kind of thing going on. So
looking back, it's obvious what was going to happen. You think, now that makes sense.
Yeah. And even the way, because of my old business, we used to try and solve this problem, the way crypto had to present itself to the institutional market was to take the square peg and make it look round. So, the big pension funds and, all that sort of stuff have a mandate, and they can only buy certain assets.
Right.
So how do and crypto wasn't on the list. So how do we solve that problem? Well, we have to package it up and make it look like a thing that they can buy. And so a lot of people, particularly in North America, have been working on that for years, and suddenly they've done it. And no surprise, as you say, and it shouldn't be a surprise that suddenly it looks like a tech stock, and so they'd be treated like a tech stock. But that's a new and large volume part of the market, but there's still a huge retail base as well who are into it for lots of different reasons. And there's always waves, I want to use that term. And so in certain markets, there's a huge focus on gaming, metaverse type stocks
Right.
and tokens. You've got NFTs running around in various parts of the world. You've got other people in other parts of the world who are focusing more on the payments part of it. So it's not, I wouldn't say it like globally, it's a uniform market. So you're seeing regional growth and adoption in certain places, because even now at today's prices, it's still seen as quite an attractive option for certain parts of the world.
Right. I mean, in terms of that regional point there, like the growth of play to earn that came out of, is it the Philippines?
Yeah, staggering.
For Axie is just unreal. Like what happened with that? I think a lot of crypto people have it in the back of their head, but not so many other people that are worried about their day-to-day lives or what they're doing is how global these markets are.
Yeah, and that's the challenge we all face, because we're all domiciled in a certain country with its own rules and regulations, and yet it operates much more like the internet, and it's now wealth transference in various different forms and guises, whether it's an NFT or a token or whatever it is. So, that is one of the interesting things going on, and so, as you say, subject to how an underlying economy is performing, you can see spikes in certain regions, and certainly, when Venezuela was having troubles with its inflation and a relationship with the US, there was big spikes in crypto. It was particularly Bitcoin. It was as volatile as it was still less volatile than the underlying currency, and eminently less controlled in terms of where it could go.
Well, volatile maybe in both directions as opposed to just the bad one.
Yeah.
Is crypto as a whole that square peg? Is it now its own unique peg? You mentioned about maybe a fourth asset class. I'm sure everyone at EasyCrypto sees it that way. What about everyone else?
It's certainly emerging. I don't think it's there yet.
Okay.
And even, if you're deep into crypto, there's 15, 20,000 assets and whatever, if you're an institution, you talk about Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum and stablecoins, and so the narrative isn't quite the same. Like, there are people who are seeing it as an asset class, an investable asset class. And, I recently caught up with Rupert Carlon at Koura Wealth, who, added Bitcoin into his KiwiSaver option. And they're saying, their guidance was add in a small proportion. I think it was, around 5%.
Yep.
Because you can get outweighted gains, and if it doesn't work, hey, you're not going to get punished because it's not going to drag you down too much. So, and those guys are still thinking that way. And we hear a lot about the outliers, like MicroStrategy, which have gone all in, but they are the outliers.
Absolutely.
There aren't many businesses who are just so belligerently betting the farm like that on Bitcoin.
So with Rupert at Koura Investments, is he crazy for offering 5 or 10% allocation to KiwiSaver?
I think it's again, like, it's like saying don't offer Tesla stocks because it's a risky bet. If there's enough demand for it, and it's what are we, 2022? It's been running now for Bitcoin. Has been running now for 12 years.
That's right. So
it's got enough longevity, and there's enough data points now that people can run solid TAs on it and analyze it, and they can, as an asset, it's got enough around it that it certainly is justifiable. And do I still believe that you can get outside gains by investing in it? Yes. That's, we believe that in the entire sector, but particularly with Bitcoin. So I don't think he's crazy at all. I think it's a great differentiator for him in the market. I think if you look globally, he's not, he's a first in New Zealand, but he's not in global context.
That's right. It's not as strange when you look around.
Exactly. And so, and this is the danger to all of the narratives is it can be shaped by the media and the location that you live in. And so trying to get a global context on all those conversations is the critical part. And again, he's not alone in doing this. And, I don't think he'll be the last either. That would be my view.
I clicked on the press release with anticipation when it came through my feed, and I was like, oh, hang on, let's have a look at this. And I am definitely considering taking his fund up on that option.
Was it brave? Probably, but it was just a good piece of analysis. And, like I said, they've done the risk assessment on how much you probably should and where you're going to get the gains, and they got opinions on that. They're letting people go higher than that. Good on them. Like, we're really stoked to see it.
Yeah, for sure.
The ideal scenario would be a more local ETF rather than one coming out of Canada. But, you have to take what's out there. That's the thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, Canada seems to have put up their hand and said, okay, we'll gobble up a whole bunch of this. They have heaps of funds, maybe not heaps, but they have, 5 or 10 between Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Correct.
That are running right now.
And that is an unintended consequences of the American regime on crypto, right? The Americans have made it too hard, and the Canadians have gone, we'll do it.
All right, let's talk about some global expansion. So EasyCrypto late last year successfully acquired some seed funding, 17 million from a range of investors in an offer that was oversubscribed. This is from Janine Granger, your co-founder. She goes on to say, we found it quite difficult to get investors over the line. Cryptocurrency is seen as a bit fringe, a bit volatile, and I think it's taken us a while to find investors who perhaps had that forward-looking strategic vision. In operation right now, you have business in Brazil, South Africa, and Australia. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so I guess to start this line of questioning, how did you decide on these markets and what's attractive about them?
So when we look at markets, there's a number of criteria. So we do a market assessment. What is the crypto adoption now? What's it growing at? Its compound annual growth rate. We then have to, because of we're crypto, we have to pay attention to the regulatory regime. Some countries make it incredibly difficult, and some countries are more open to that. There's some critical elements that we still need the traditional finance sector for. We need a bank.
Right.
Some countries you can't get a bank account, and so they get precluded. And then it's also the way our model works is we need to be able to tap into other crypto marketplaces for liquidity, and so we just have to understand what's going on there. So we look at various factors around that sort of stuff and come up with a plan. And so we're also investigating at least 4 other markets. We're shamelessly Southern Hemisphere focused. We don't want to go into the Northern Hemisphere for a lot of reasons, but it's pretty competitive up there. But we think the Southern Hemisphere
that's interesting.
But that's underserved. And at our core, we believe crypto is the future, and we want to bring that future to people who need it the most. And frankly, that's not someone in up until Ukraine, that wasn't someone in Western Europe.
Right.
It was people who are struggling with payments. It's people who haven't got access to equity markets and or even banking. It's that kind of marketplace. So that's why we focus where we focus. The other key variable is we want to know whether that market will respond well to our proposition, which is not the same as all the other big exchanges up there. There is no trading view screen. There is no complex order structures and stuff like that. Like we're also focused on the very beginning of the crypto journey. So we want to help people get into crypto. It's not saying we don't have a lot of long-standing, kind of OGs in crypto speak using our platform. In fact, we're always continually surprised that the amount of people that turn up who've been using us for years. But our purpose in life is kind of bringing new people to crypto, and so we're trying to make that as easy as possible.
Well, I'll give you that. It's really damn easy, especially once you're set up and used to the process.
Yeah.
I don't know, in under 2 minutes, I can have an order, and sometimes the order is settled within 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice. So maybe just run back to Brazil for a second. So I haven't done the numbers, but do they have an active crypto community in terms of uptake?
Yeah, it's growing really, really quickly. They're sadly been affected by currency and inflation for quite a long time. So there's, that's kind of macro dynamic going on. There are some established players in there, but it is a market that's growing at an incredible clip, and they are hungry for providers to help them on the journey, and so that was a big tick for us. Also, surprising, while they're quite an analog in terms of paper-based regulatory regime, at least it's defined and you can follow it and all that sort of stuff. And so it has taken a while to kind of get all of those things lined up and the company structures that we need to be able to compliantly operate and all that sort of stuff. But it was just a really good fit. It's got lots of potential, and we think we can differentiate ourselves in that space and go at a scale that makes most New Zealand companies' head comes off. You kind of, we've had instances where we've done a little bit of test marketing. We've had more sign-ups in a day in Brazil than we had in New Zealand in a week, kind of stuff. I'm exaggerating, but it is a scale market, and so just making sure we've got everything lined up to deal with that has been an interesting journey as well.
When we talked briefly before today's chat, you mentioned about lightweight exports. I think this might fit in here. Can you explain what you mean by Kiwis having lightweight exports?
So look, it's a kind of thought that's been lingering in my head since the early 2000s when the cloud computing stuff came along, and it was a real opportunity for New Zealand to get out of our more traditional exports and into what I call a lightweight digital economy. And we have, off the top of my head, 3 really notable success stories. Xero was, the obvious standout, but Vend was an obvious standout, and PushPay. Those 3 companies, and I know there's a lot more, and I know the gaming sector in New Zealand's about $1 billion. So, these aren't insignificant markets, but that's the type of thing where we can export a digital item.
Production as well.
Yeah. And so that's the type of thing I'm talking about when I'm saying that. And I think, I think blockchain meets all of the kind of generic criteria for a disruptive technology. It fits the Paul Callahan model that it's, weird and wonderful, and New Zealand could kind of stand up and live in that space. And it's being proven. You've got across the entire blockchain sector a number of very successful New Zealand-based companies. You've got On Finality just focusing on the dot ecosystem. You got the Fluff World stuff and beyond, and NF Labs and all that sort of stuff. So there's a really big metaverse thing going on in New Zealand, and it's, based on and I'm not an NFT guy, but based on what I can see, it's really, really good compared to other offerings. So, it's really impressive. And Aaron and the other McDonald's involved in that have done a sterling job. Then you've got, people like Andre and Troy with Outward and, Trade Window who are doing things in supply chains. Because again, New Zealand is a supply chain dependent business. It's a clear problem. Blockchains can solve that stuff, and so they're doing really well in that regard.
And you want EasyCrypto to be on that list?
Well, yeah, we are. We'd argue that we are. We're doing our best to grow crypto adoption at a global basis. We just have this focus at one part of the market, and that's this kind of onboarding gateway to the crypto sphere. And if people get educated and get wise and get into NFTs or get into DeFi or get into other products that other companies in New Zealand are building, fantastic. Like we want the tide to rise. But we do think, and my personal view is that with the right setups and laws and guidance and around tax and banking and all of that stuff that are continual problems for blockchain type businesses, New Zealand could really turn it on. It's kind of ironic to me that here we are in 2022 thinking about putting a massive data center in next to TY Point. That's a good idea, but that idea needed to happen 2003, 2004. To be absolutely
to break ground and hit cloud in its stride.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And whether or not that happens, I actually I'm not following it, but I still hear it. I remember hearing it back in the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, kind of stuff. And we're a great economy for people to come and do business in. We've got well-educated populations, we've got stable government, we've got low dodginess and just across the,
right. The corruption index is low globally.
Yeah. our banking is stable, all that sort of stuff. So, we are a good economy to be thinking about that sort of stuff. And one of the massive upsides of COVID was people realize you can work on a global basis. We are a business of 100 people and we don't have an office. And more than half of our people are around the world.
Right, which 3 years ago, that was absolutely crazy.
Exactly. And so do I spend a lot of time on video conferencing? Yeah, but that's how we roll. The rules around where you can access these skill pools, these labour pools and wonderful skill sets are, they kind of got discarded in the last 2 years. And so, again, there's no reason why we couldn't make the most of that.
Do you think that banking can fit into this lightweight export theme? You've mentioned it a few times, and everyone that's tried to start a crypto business knows how difficult it is to just obtain normal banking services. And you mentioned that in your expansion, that can often halt expansion plans straight away if there might be something that comes up in terms of banking. So do you see that as possibly fitting in, or where do we stand? Are we still known to be behind the rest of the West?
So, first up, we do have it's not exclusive. We've got a great banking relationship, and we're really happy with how that's been, and I think they are too. But not everyone has had that wonderful experience, and it is a risk to businesses and you don't hear about it in New Zealand, but in Australia, crypto companies and debanking is a common conversation. And there's been a number of cases that have gone up to I think it's the ACCC around that sort of stuff to just go, all we do is this, and they won't bank us, and they won't give us reasons why, that sort of stuff. So I don't know the answer to that. I know that in America there's a bank called Silvergate who went early and said, we'll deal with crypto businesses. And I know they went from basically being an unknown to very, very successful on the basis of that. And they're so successful, they're probably, if you think about it, like an institutional risk to crypto, because they are one of the few banks that said, we're open for business.
They're kind of the default that you would go to at first.
And so they're not now, and thankfully there's a bunch more banks that are getting there, but it's an opportunity, I would think, to banks. There are a number of, I would think personally that a classic neobank, I've got my fingers in the air because that's a generic term for whatever. It's not that. It's one of these, whatever one of these is.
Okay.
Could set themselves up quite nicely to deal with the sector if they kind of wrap their heads around it. The thing about banks is their major moat is the regulatory one on the capital requirements. And so you end up kind of chained to a nation, right? So banking doesn't work particularly well on a global basis unless you...
I think that's very well said. Banking doesn't particularly work well on a global basis, hence perhaps something decentralized that
could do that,
is agnostic to the particular regulatory environment.
But then it's also, even the IMF have come out swinging against crypto and blockchain. So they just, I forget which strategist, but there's a famous strategist who said basically, given the choice between changing and providing evidence of why you should do nothing, most people get busy finding evidence, right? And that seems to be the case. Like, people are still working on why you shouldn't be doing this. They're not looking at the opportunity that the technology can bring. Our market's 24/7. You can shift wealth, money, currencies 24/7. And that is at least 3 times better than the current banking system.
That's right, just based on that alone.
Just on that alone. Yeah. And you can't tell me that cannot be a benefit to consumers. Like, there's no scenario where that's not good for consumers. So what is it that's holding that up, I guess is the question. And
it's a massive opportunity here. Do they have anything like that in Australia?
No.
Okay.
No, not same sort of stuff. And that shouldn't really be a surprise, given that the ownership structure of the banks is largely reflective here.
Right.
There are more banks in Australia, but there are, our major banks here are owned by every single one of them by Australian outfits. So,
coming back to EasyCrypto, you folks specialize in being a non-custodial place where you can buy and sell digital assets. And as we already mentioned, you make it pretty easy. I had a look a few days ago. You have 159 assets or coins that are being listed. So what are your considerations that you undertake when you want to list projects? And do you look at any ethical considerations when listing a new coin? Just for example, if I tell my little brother it's easy to use EasyCrypto, and he comes back to me and sends me a text and says, hey, Jeff, I just bought a bunch of Shiba Inu token. What's the risk that he's not going to be able to sell it tomorrow or sometime in the future? And how do you folks have that discussion?
Yeah. Look, it's at one level it's pretty easy, and another area it's pretty hard. And so we're adding assets all of the time. We listed 4 new ones yesterday.
Okay, my number's out of date.
Yeah. So, but we are adding assets all the time, and our approach is to let our customers, not the wider community, because we figured that out early in the early days that people will game that, so our customers can vote. And we look at it. We do it. We review it a couple of times a month in terms of what's there, and we look at the assets that have come through, and then we go off and do diligence on every one of those projects.
So you literally look at the assets that your customers have asked for.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we do. And we'll look at the projects. We'll look at the founders. Google's wonderful at highlighting people who might have had issues in their past. So we'll look at that sort of stuff. We also look at if to your point, we don't want to leave our customers stranded with an asset that may fall away. So we look at, is there enough volume there to warrant, for us to feel comfortable, not warrant, but for us to feel comfortable that it's going to be there and at least a long period of time, notwithstanding crazy events like happened a couple of weeks ago. So we look at that sort of stuff. We also have to look at, is it liquid? So can we get enough of it and feel comfortable that people are going to be able to trade it without massive spreads? Because if it's illiquid, you end up with the buy price and the sell price being quite different, and that just generally makes people feel like they're being ripped off, and so we don't want to do it.
Right, not a nice experience. Or in some place like a decentralized market, you experience a lot of slippage, and you end up with not what you were promised on the tin at first.
Exactly, and so we look at that. We also have to be careful not to list anything that's deemed a financial product, and so that's another criteria. And there's always questions, maybe you could list an indices, and and we're like, we'd love to, but those are financial products, and we're not listed to do financial products. Crypto in New Zealand, there's a clear delineation between what used to be called a utility token and what used to be called a security token, and so we're in the utility token space, so nothing that looks like a financial product. And so we just have to look at that sort of stuff.
So something like a DeFi index, that's not going to turn up anytime soon.
Not at this stage, right? Because that sounds suspicious. Without looking at it, that sounds suspiciously like a financial product.
Okay.
It's grey.
Well, it's easier to point to something like that and say, no, that's a financial product.
Correct.
Than it is to point to something else where people are saying, well, I need it to use the network, and therefore...
Sure. So that type of thing would cause us an issue. So we look at that sort of stuff as well. And then, to your point, we definitely want to make sure that there's a degree of longevity, and the ethical question is a challenging one for us as well.
Right.
And we have this debate regularly. Like we don't want to be in the business of telling you what you can and can't buy, but at the same time, we want you to recognize that even in crypto, there's a spectrum of risk. If you go to some places, they'll give you a risk rating on what you're investing between 1 and 7, and
sure.
And Bitcoin's at 7, and I'm like, boy, wait till you see this stuff over here, because that'll be like a 30. And so
that's a good point. Some of the tools on CoinMarketCap, for example, will list you. They've found a risk rating somewhere, and for a long time there. Or they found something like a stability rating. And for a long time, Bitcoin was never at the top, and they had various other ones that outranked Bitcoin. And you think,
by miles.
How is that possible?
By miles. And then in our own microcosm of cryptoness, Bitcoin is seen as the safer haven asset, right? You've got stable coins as well, but Bitcoin is safer to be in than some of this other stuff. So that gives you a feel for just how funky some of this other stuff can be. And we have this thing internally, we call it the 3 E's. And one of them is, is it easy? Can we educate people around it? And is it the right thing to do? Is it ethical, right? And so, that we apply that to how we build products, we apply that to how we talk to our customers, we apply it to everything. And so, and again, though, we respect your right to make the choice. We just want you to be informed in doing that.
So you do have a system of checks and balances
Sure,
that you're keeping an eye on.
And you and I talked last week. Like we're not the first company in the world to ever list an asset. That's not what we're about, given who we're targeting. So there will always be someone who's got it out there in market sooner.
So let's talk about a big hiccup in the crypto markets a couple of weeks ago. My notes here, I labeled it the Terra death spiral.
Yeah.
So just over 2 weeks ago, UST, the Terra stablecoin, lost its peg and began its downward run.
Mm-hmm.
I had a look this morning. Since the depegging, crypto markets are down about 20%
mm-hmm.
or $300 billion US dollars. General markets have already been on the way down since then. So I have an EasyCrypto based question here, which is how do you handle situations like this? Like what's happening in the war room? I'm curious as to what happens when you decide to pull the plug. And then a follow-up question is, can algorithmic stablecoins survive after this event?
I'm going to lose some friends on that one. So the US Terra thing was a kind of a crypto black swan event, and so to your usual point, in our war room, like we started to see massive volumes coming, initially sell volumes, and then ironically buy volumes. People thought it would regain its peg, and it was, if it's still worth $1 and it's now at, I think it was at 60 cents or 40 cents or whatever, those are good gains. The math works, except for the fact that it could go way lower. And so we saw a lot of volume in that regard. And then the big problem across the entire industry is when everyone started to halt trading. And I talked to you before about liquidity. Like we go to markets and buy that stuff, and if we can't buy it to fulfill the orders, then it creates a problem.
Right, your hands are actually tied.
Yeah, and that chain actually halted. Like things were so bad that they stopped the chain.
So I've also never seen that on that point. Solana is now famous for having issues and shutting down due to technical issues.
Yeah.
But the fact that they shut down Terra, I'd never seen that before. I remember texting my friend. I'm like, they actually shut down the blockchain.
Yeah. So one, not particularly decentralized. So and two, holy hecker. So for your audience, that effectively means you can't sell anything. There's nothing to facilitate the transactions, and so you have a whole bunch of orders sitting there going, what? And you've got an asset that can't move. It was completely locked up. So in that instance, we tried several things. We laid our hands on as much Luna or as we could to fulfill the orders. We also gave our clients who had experienced quite long delays, because it took weeks to unravel, credits. We did everything we can, but eventually we had to stop trading it. We just couldn't. There was no way we could fulfill the orders, and ethically we're looking at it going, that looks like it's heading to zero.
Right.
And
it really did have that feeling, and as you indicated before, people wanted to come in and buy that dip.
Sure. And so all of that happened, and in any war room, analogy is a good one. I don't know if you can plan for that. That's in the craziness of crypto, that's still a fairly unprecedented event. And so, we had to respond to what was in front of us, the game that was in front of us. And so that's how we kind of rolled with that one. But sadly, as you said, $300 billion came off the crypto market, but on that project alone, I think it's like $19 billion gone, just vaporized. And
that's right, yeah.
And a bunch of people who believed the advertising that it was a stable asset got completely burnt.
And there's a big differentiation here between markets being over-levered, where people get liquidated from trading, whereas this time that asset's not recovering. You're never going to sell it again for a fraction of...
Correct. And it was supposed to be a safe haven asset. Stable coins are supposed to fulfill that function. Then in volatile periods, you go to stables. and it broke it, and so a lot of people got hurt by that, and it's unfortunate, like it's really unfortunate, but they're still going, and Do Kwon's still saying he's got a plan, butter.
Oh, it's insane, isn't it? It's
But,
just
yeah.
nuts. I can't believe that guy is still tweeting. Like,
Yeah, I mean, not much credibility, I guess, in that regard. It wasn't a great week, and there's.
and so when price is moving that fast, do you have built-in circuit breakers or anything on your orders, just based on the fact that you might end up being on the hook, for a lot of EasyCrypto capital if you're promising these orders and you can't fulfill them?
Yeah, look, the circuit breaker kicks in when we can't get access to it, so that's how that happens. So you talked about the fact the time from when cash hits us until when you get your crypto is really short, and that's the special sauce of our model. So that worked, and if you were involved in that, you would have seen the emails. So the rate that you bought it at is locked in. The problem comes when we can't fulfill the order because the chain's locked, or the liquidity sources are stopped trading, or whatever it is. And so those were the problems that happened. And the reality is that people were placing orders on something that by the time we get it to them, it was worth zero. And so that's why we offered the credit that we did, because that was not a great outcome, and that's not what we're here to do. So, but we just couldn't get in that instance because the chain was locked in, all the other liquidity sources were toast. We just couldn't get it.
Right. Binance had a hiccup there where they never expected the coin to trade below 70 cents. And so when the stable went below 70 cents, trading turned off. And people thought that Binance had shut it down, but it was actually basically an internal system error. Right. I mean, it reminds me of like the Jurassic Park scene where Jeff Goldblum, is saying life will find a way. And on the computer, they say, oh, we've only got 17 raptors. And that's because they're only programmed to look for 17 raptors.
Right.
And when they change the limits to see what's out there in the park, they go, oh, holy shit.
Yeah. And I'm sure there were a few moments like that. And so, I mean, that was, like I said, it was unprecedented. And so, but yeah, that was a big week.
And so stablecoins going forward, what do you think?
Look, I honestly think as an innovation, they're a great idea. They just have to be done properly. And, there's three groups of stablecoins. There's the fiat-backed stablecoins, so the two premier candidates are USDC and USDT. Then there's asset-backed stablecoins, and for me, the premier candidate there is DAI. And in fact, based on very limited research, that looked like the most stable through that whole period.
Yeah, DAI has been stress tested in the markets with their vault system, and seems to do very well. Yeah,
so so that was there, and then you have a group called Algo Coins. I think it's fair to say that, generally speaking, they have been viewed as kind of an experiment, or a little bit suspicious. I think all of them, and I'm thinking of the 5 I've seen on a Valkyrie report, all of them got an absolute kicking when Terra went down because people were questioning the actual mode.
That's right. Yeah.
And as an experiment, we've got our answer. And so I'm not saying that there can't be an algo stable, but I think it needs to be thought through. And, look, the past is easy to look at. But there were people 8-10 months ago, kind of Terra truthers out there saying this: if both UST goes down and Luna goes down, you're going to end up on a run because they were supposed to counterbalance.
Yeah, we had that great run last year, I guess. July to November was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And that coincided exactly with Luna blowing up. Everyone got really excited about it. A lot of people said, well, hang on, the stablecoin is backed by the total market capitalization of Luna. Luna's algorithmically programmed to be distributed.
Yeah.
There's no circuit breaker. You can always redeem.
Yeah.
And so, people knew on paper there's a less than sign there involved from mathematics. People knew if that imbalance kicked in that there was going to be a problem.
Yeah. And like in fairness to the Terra Foundation, I think that's the name of them.
LFG, the Luna Foundation Guard.
That's in the LFG. I mean, they had $3 billion in assets as well. Like they could see there could be a problem when you've got, was it 21 billion in in issuance, and it's only backed by 3 billion of other assets, and Luna was in free fall. Like it was it was a classic bank style run that we have seen in traditional finance in certain markets, but it was that. And it just created a death spiral. And then when they started dumping Bitcoin and USDT and whatever else they held, it just created a systemic run and made it worse. And again, it was entirely predictable. I think today you're a mathematician. Like you could look at the tokenomics and work out how to gamify that. And I'm not saying that people did, but again, I had heard.
I'm on the side that people did. And by people, very large players, people with access to huge amounts of capital.
Well, apparently it was on Bloomberg. Like Bloomberg told people that this will be the short trade of the century. Like, and I don't follow Bloomberg enough, obviously, because I didn't see that. But so it was widely known that there was it was a classic George Soros type trade. You knew that someone was going to keep pumping money in, and you knew if you kept shorting it and driving it down, that eventually they'd capitulate, because the math said it would. And so once that was out, I think it was always just a matter of time. I've got no evidence to support what you've just said, but I suspect you're right. I think somebody gamed it and made a lot of money on the way through.
I think we will. The blockchain trail exists in perpetuity. I think we will find out more in the future. Coming to the end of our time here, I want to talk about Blockchain New Zealand as an industry group. So I'm interested to know what your view is on how an industry body such as us, how we can assist members, or what you think that the role is of members, and where there are areas perhaps that we could help, or perhaps that we could facilitate potential growth or anything like that.
So look, I think you guys do a wonderful job of bringing us together, because we all get into our little bubbles, because we're all trying to be growth engines, and that's a full-time job in its own right. And occasionally we need to get together and find out, lift the heads above the parapet a bit and find out what's going on. And I think you do a great job in doing that. And I also think advocacy, like wider advocacy for what blockchain could be in terms of the New Zealand economy and all that sort of stuff, is an interesting angle for you. And we can do it individually as companies, but I think there's also room for an organisation such as yourself. You and I talked about this a while back as well. Like, I think if we all stepped back and spoke to each other, we would uncover a common set of challenges or issues or whatever it is. And I think I think we do ourselves a disservice in reinventing that. The only people really doing well out of it probably are the lawyers and the accountants, right? And so I think a Simmons Stewart type template library around playbook or something like this for setting up a blockchain business would be a really helpful thing. So they don't have to navigate the same stuff around regulation and jurisdiction and banking and blah. It's like I think there's room in that. And
I hear you. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, look, again, like we want the tide to rise. We're just believers in blockchain and crypto, and so I don't think there's any reason why that would be commercial in confidence. And whether it is something secret like a inland revenue determination on how tax is treated, crypto tax, there's all that stuff happens, and we know about it when we meet up because people, tell us that stuff. But it's kind of like put the sunlight on it, show it out, that sort of stuff. I think would be great. Look, I also think there's probably room for conferences in our space where we can showcase and understand what's going on, and again bridge this persistent divide between the weirdos who do crypto or blockchain and the rest of the world, when the reality is it's I don't think it is that weird.
What did Janine say? It's a bit fringe still.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't think it has to be. I guess, given that companies like Fidelity and Citibank and JP Morgan are all dealing in blockchain and cryptos, that says to me that it's semi-mainstream, right? There is an underlying element. ANZ issued its own coin. Like they basically did an ICO. That's not fringe. That's a top 20 global bank issuing a token. There are, CBA in Australia is offering their customers the ability to buy crypto in their app. That's not fringe. That's when things start to get quite
Right. That's not fringe at all. Actually, that's probably quite telling.
Exactly.
In terms of the bank's traditional standard business model.
Sure.
That they're looking to do this. Yeah.
Sure. And that's me talking crypto. That's not me talking blockchain. The ability to transparently and irrecoverably put stuff into a chain for provenance, for supply chain, for whatever, that's a technology I don't think the world's quite got its head around.
Yeah. What's next for EasyCrypto?
Great question. Look, we're continuing to look at what our product offering is going to be. We've got something that works really well. We recognise that there's a new batch of consumers coming through who are more familiar with things like Sharesies and Hatch and all that sort of stuff. So we're wondering what that means for us in terms of adoption. I think services such as DeFi are an interesting play for us. It's all well and good giving people tokens. It's like, let's now give you something to do with your tokens. Get a treat it like a crypto bank account type of thing. And I think that's an interesting idea for us.
By that, do you mean perhaps staking of some kind?
I think Ethereum's
a pretty obvious one that's coming
generically up. I'm going to use the term a yield instrument, right? And so
sure.
I don't think we have the answer around whether it's going to be staking or whether it's going to be nodes or whether it's going to be into a DeFi thing or anything like that. But there's all of those wonderful options. This is the incredible thing about our
that whole thing would definitely run in parallel to what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah. And so all of that stuff needs to be thought through, but with the overriding thing of our 3 E's and also security, right? It has to be done in a way that people who are new to crypto can feel like they're comfortable with it, doing it, and so we're working through all of that sort of stuff. We're also leaning in on our growth markets. So, like I said, Brazil and South Africa and Australia, we're continuing to work through how we can do some stuff in there. Each one of those markets has got some interesting dynamics. Startups I use this kind of analogy, you kind of underwater in the dark on a dam, feeling your way along, and then suddenly there's a hole in the dam and you just go, right? And so sometimes you got to find that hole in the dam and to just find the way to move to the next part of it. And so we're always doing that. We're always hustling for how we can make our boat go faster, because we want to bring crypto to the world. That's what we want to do.
Right.
And so, we're kind of passionate about that, and we want to do it as fast as we can, as compliantly as we can, and give our customers the same cool experience they get here, but in their jurisdiction and with their flavors and that sort of stuff. And as you've said, Philippines is just completely dominated Axie Infinity world, and how predictable is that? Like, you stand back, you couldn't pick it.
Yeah.
But there was something about that market where they seemed to create this wonderful community tribalism thing and they just got in and it just federated like you wouldn't believe. Like, the network effect was just staggering. And so, like I said, someone found a hole in the dam and swam through it, and
for sure,
good on them. So that's what we're just trying to do for the rest of our growth trajectories and all that sort of stuff. So,
all right, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so are we.
All right, we're almost out of time here. Are you up for some rapid fire?
Absolutely.
Okay. Number 1, are we in a recession?
No.
Number 2, FTX or Binance?
Can't answer that. Haven't used one of them.
Really?
Don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 3, DAI or USDT?
DAI.
Why is that?
Ethics for me.
ETH2 after the merge, what are your thoughts?
Oh, really bullish on that.
Really bullish.
I think we're under anticipating what that could mean at an economic level in terms of it becoming deflationary in supply and all that sort of stuff. And that's a story that the community needs to tell a bit better. That one? Yep. I
would tend to agree. All year I've been thinking that the merge is going to be the story of the year, and then Terra had to step in and throw things, but it's still a bit early in the year, I guess, or midway through the year. Okay, last one. Who is Satoshi?
Oh, I think he's a wonderful person who brought something absolutely staggering to the world, and I completely empathise with his decision to say anonymous. I don't know if we're ever going to know. Maybe how, I don't know. But
Right.
I don't know is the answer. But I'm pretty confident it's not Craig Wright.
All right, let's call it there.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you very much for coming by.
Perfect. Thanks for the invite. It's been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun. There's no way it's Craig Wright. That guy, okay, so